everyone, I've been making my own celery powder for a while now, and I've been using it in a bunch of different dishes. And I thought you guys would really like it too, so I'm going to show you how to make your own celery powder today. It's really quite easy. It's just a little bit time-consuming waiting for the celery to dry. You're going to need 1 to 2 celery bunches, a dehydrator, a coffee grinder, a funnel, and an empty jar to store your celery powder. An old spice jar works great. Let's get started. Take 1 or 2 full heads of celery and make sure they're washed, trimmed, and dry. Cut them into even slices, somewhere around a 1/4 inch thick. If you have a food processor with a 1/4 inch slicing disc, that would actually work great. Once they're all cut, place them on your dehydrator trays, spaced evenly apart. This way they can all dry evenly and come out around the same time. If there are any pieces that are larger than others, you can always break them apart or cut them so that they all turn out around the same size. Then once your trays are loaded with the celery, turn your dehydrator on to 105 or 110 degrees. If you have a Nesco dehydrator like I do, once the celery shrinks up, it may fall through the trays, but don't worry, it will still dry properly in the dehydrator. This may take anywhere from 12 to 18 hours to dry, depending on how thick your celery slices are and the temperature that you use. Once they're dry, the celery will shrivel up and get really small and very hard. So this is not something that you would want to use before grinding into a powder or rehydrating in liquid. And you want to make sure your celery is completely dry before you take it out of the dehydrator. If there's any moisture left behind, it could create a mold issue later on. Once they're done, store them in a tightly sealed container in the cupboard until you're ready to use it. Once your celery is dry and ready to grind into a powder, you want to take maybe 1/4 to 1/2 of a cup of the dried celery and put it in your coffee grinder. If you don't have a coffee grinder, you can probably use your high-powered blender like a Vitamix and be able to grind this up really fine into a powder. But the coffee grinder works great. So I'm just going to grind it until it's super smooth. When you're all done, you want to tap off the powder that's built up around the top of the coffee grinder. And be sure to be really careful when you take off the lid because the powder is so fine, it will kind of go misting everywhere. I don't know if you can see that. Little puff of celery powder smoke there. So you can see how it gets ground into a really nice fine powder. So then you want to take your funnel and your spice jar and just empty the celery powder in there. And move on to your next batch. You can store your unground celery in a tightly sealed container like this one. I bought this at the Container Store. They have great mason jars with nice tight-fitting lids. and they have all different sizes, so they're really great. And you can store this in the cupboard until you're ready to grind your celery into a powder. Or you can grind it all into a powder and store it that way, however you choose. It should last quite a while since it's fully dehydrated. So this is the finished product. This was a little bit more than one bunch of celery. So you're going to go through a lot of celery because it really shrinks down in the dehydrator. But it's so worth it. This is excellent on salads, raw soups, salsa, any savory dish, and especially wonderful on tomatoes. I absolutely love celery powder on tomatoes. It's so good. It really brings out the flavor. It's not super salty, but it does have a little bit of a salty taste, but it just really brings out the flavor kind of the way salt does. It's really good, and I think you guys will really like it too. Now, for those of you who don't have a dehydrator, I'll post directions on how to use your oven in the information box below, so be sure to check that out. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to click the like button, and if you haven't yet subscribed, don't forget to click the subscribe button as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.